Greetings, welcome back, it's UK here with a video response to Shawn Driscoll's video of Do GMs Learn from Other GMs? Well, absolutely yes, at least in my point of view. Before I ever actually got to play a role-playing game, the only things I ever had to go on was from a book and a couple of, I think, magazine articles. I think they were Dragon magazine, back in the 80s, where you had example games, you know, where it types the GM, Steve, you know, your characters enter the dungeon, blah blah blah, blah description, player A, and says this or does this, you know, and you get that example of how of an example play, and I think those coloured me to a bit of an extent, because I would quite like it, I suppose, if games actually played like that a bit more. But once I actually got to roleplay, it was my first proper GM, a guy I met at school called Chris. And Chris was my first GM. He's also my favourite, because although I've had many GMs, there's always been something that I kind of sit there and inwardly grumble to myself, I wish you wouldn't do that. I never had that with Chris. Chris was fantastic. His games were always awesome. He could do the serious, he could do the funny, he could do the horror, he could do everything in between. It was great. Sadly, it's been about 20 years now, I think, since he last ran a game that I played in, sadly. You never know, that may change. Fingers crossed. But I'd certainly think that the approach he had back then, back when we were at school in the early 90s, I certainly think rubbed off on me a little bit. Now, I don't know whether that's where my approach of, you know, the story, you know, you turn up to a game, you're there to tell the story the GM is presenting, sort of comes from. But I do remember that the games that we had back then, you know, we never really worried about character backgrounds, we never really worried about anything like that. It was a case of you made your character, and whether it was a one-off or whether it was an actual sort of like campaign or something, you sat down and you played it. We started, I think the first proper game was Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay that we did, and back when it was a Games Workshop product, and we did the first two parts of the Enemy Within campaign, and I just remember it was a case of, you know, we got introduced at the beginning. I mean, it was myself and one other guy. I don't remember his name. I only ever met him at the game. He was playing a nobleman. I was playing a mercenary, and we got on and we told the story. We played it through. And there was another time, there's another example. I remember one, I can't remember if it was over the summer holidays or it was a Christmas holiday, but he ran a one GM, one player, me and him, RuneQuest game, which was basically a caravan guarding duty. And just to show an example of how good he was, this was the hardcover version that, again, Games Workshop put out in the 80s. And the back of one of the books was a series of tables. And you rolled on these tables to see what happened, and you could move, you know, if you were unlucky, you ended up going off track, and it went from civilised to rural to wilderness to right in the middle of nowhere. But pretty much every session would be we'll roll on the table, what happens, and he just winged an entire story out of it. Now, I've never been quite that good, I suppose I'm rambling now, but the point was that he told a story and you played that story, and it didn't matter that you didn't have anything else. So I think GM style, I've definitely taken it from him. But you know, as I can't remember if I mentioned earlier, but I've obviously picked up bits from other GMs that I've played with. You know, because I don't think you can, as a GM yourself, play in a game without seeing how your fellow GMs do things and just going, oh, I might copy that, and you do, and your game gets better. So rather than waffle on a bit further, I definitely think that GMs learn from GMs. I mean, the YouTube RPG Brigade is a perfect example, because while there are people there, or here, however you want to put it, who I find are fairly close to my views and approaches to GMing, and I learn stuff from them. There are also a few people who I disagree quite strongly with. Pardon me. But they still have some good advice, and I've still picked up bits from them. So I definitely think that the situation, your question is right. Do GMs learn from GMs? Yes, absolutely. Anyway, I've waffled on far too much, and I think I have really waffled on that one. But hopefully that answers your question, at least from my perspective. I look forward to your next set of videos, Sean. Until then, take care, good gaming.